Hey everyone, I'm Corin, your Dallas realtor, and today I'm giving you all the pros and cons for those of you considering a move from the beautiful Puget Sound to the sunny Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So I personally made the move to Dallas 5 years ago with my wife, leaving behind our childhood home of the Puget Sound. We sold our home in Crown Hill in 2018 and we made the move, and we haven't looked back since. So before we get started, if you decide to make the move to Dallas, or you need help finding a realtor elsewhere to buy or sell, please reach out day or night. I love helping people with their real estate needs. I've helped people all over the country move to Dallas-Fort Worth, and I especially love helping fellow travelers from the Puget Sound make this move. Okay, let's get into it. So first up, we've got to talk about the weather. It goes without saying that Texas is a whole lot warmer than Seattle, but if you're moving to the Dallas area, you can look forward to more sun as well. Contrary to popular belief, Dallas does get all four seasons, so you will get to experience colder months in the winter when it will drop down into the 40s and possibly into the 30s on occasion. On the bright side, you will also get some days in the high 50s or low 60s between December and February. So the summers will be hotter than your normal summers in Seattle, but it's mostly a dry heat here in Dallas, which is one of the reasons I chose Dallas over the major cities in the Texas Triangle, which experience more humidity in an even hotter climate than Dallas does. The other benefit to living somewhere hot that they don't tell you about is that central air conditioning is everywhere, and in the summers you can't live without it here. Most people go from their homes to their cars to work, and they generally avoid going outside much in the summers. Living in Dallas, you'll find that you can go out and enjoy life a lot more easily because the weather is usually pretty mild. The best seasons for getting out in nature are spring and fall when the weather is temperate throughout the day. And you can definitely go out in the summers, but it will be lounging at the pool or in one of the many lakes in the area. You don't want to go for a stroll in a t-shirt and jeans in the middle of summer. Now, if you've got dogs to walk, I'd recommend walking them before 10 in the morning and after 8 p.m. when the sun isn't so high in the sky. So when it comes to the weather, this one for me is a wash. Having more sun is a huge benefit, and I love being able to go out and not worry about being cold. But sweating it out in the summer isn't much fun either. So if you're sick of the rain and gray skies in Seattle, you'll love it here in Dallas. But if you hate the sun, then maybe the South just isn't for you.
Good morning!
Morning! Good morning!
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
So when it comes to state neighbors, this is something that people don't talk about a lot, but in Washington State, you've got Canada to the north, which can be a lovely place to visit between Vancouver, Mount Whistler, and Victoria. And you've also got the Oregon coast, which is a popular destination for out-of-state excursions. But other than that, there isn't a whole lot of exploring nearby to do in Washington. No offense, Idaho. In the case of Texas, there's a whole nother level of neighboring states that are worth the visit. So first up, the state of Texas does not allow casinos, which could be considered a con for some, but luckily God intervened for you gamblers and gave Texas the state of Oklahoma, which has some of the most excellent casinos in the country outside of Vegas. You can head to Broken Bow, Oklahoma to the Choctaw Casino and Resort, which is only a 2.5-hour drive from Dallas. Now, Broken Bow is also a very popular destination for summer vacationing, where people go kayaking, canoeing, and river floating between the time at the casino and downtown shopping. Now, if the slopes are more your thing, then you can go skiing and snowboarding in Ruidoso, New Mexico, which is the closest ski resort by car at about 9 hours away and just a 2-hour flight. They're also only a 13-hour drive and a 2.5-hour flight to Aspen, Colorado, or the rest of Colorado for that matter, which is great for all sorts of mountaineering activities, especially if you're missing the great outdoors of Washington State. Now, the best part about Dallas that I haven't even gotten to yet is that the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport is the second busiest airport in the world, which means you get to enjoy cheap flights to pretty much anywhere in the world. And believe me, your pocketbook will feel it compared to what you pay to fly out of Seattle. Now let's get back to our neighbors. To the southeast, you've got New Orleans, which is about an 8-hour drive from Dallas, Texas. New Orleans has a lot of great things to do, especially if you're a foodie. The restaurants are world class, and it's probably the closest thing that you're gonna get to eating in France while living in America. And if you like to drink, Bourbon Street is a must visit and a popular destination for Dallas residents during Mardi Gras. There's also an abundance of family-friendly entertainment in and around the city, from cool escape rooms, amazing architecture, museums, and historic parks. Make sure you take the family over to Cafe Du Monde when you visit New Orleans for their world-famous beignets. And you can also enjoy a walk along the Mississippi while you're snacking on them. Also, when pronouncing New Orleans, just remind yourself it is or and lens, like a camera lens.
Kill them swiftly if you will, but do it!
Don't stress too much about it though. They even pronounce this incorrectly throughout all of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire film, which I thought was pretty funny whenever you watched it recently.
In the spring of 1988, I returned to New Orleans.
The National World War II Museum is also a must visit if you take a trip to New Orleans, and it's hands down the best World War II museum that you'll ever go to. Last up, to the south, we've got Mexico. Now, a lot of border towns in Mexico are not the safest to go to, so I'd recommend doing your research before you consider a trip to Mexico. But there are a lot of good resorts that you can fly to from the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport that are pretty inexpensive, such as Cancun. So when it comes to state neighbors, I'd say Dallas has Seattle beat. It has more coastline than Washington State, and it's still got a more diverse range of interesting state neighbors. Oh, and don't worry, we've got our Idaho too. It's Arkansas, and there isn't really a lot to do in Arkansas unless you like hunting for diamonds at the Crater of Diamonds State Park. Sorry, Arkansas.
Come on. Let's beach off.
Anyone who wants to beach him off has to beach me off first.
I will beach both of you off at the same time.
If you want to stay in-state for a weekend getaway, you can also take a road trip down to the Gulf of Mexico and enjoy one of the many beaches that Texas has to offer. Texas beaches are sandy, unlike most of the ones in Washington, and the water in the Gulf is warmer than you'll find on the Pacific, so that makes it great for swimming. There's also mussels, clams, and oysters along the Texas coastline, just like you've got in Washington State. Now, you can even spot orcas here in Texas, off the coast in Galveston, but you're more likely to catch sightings of dolphins here in the state of Texas. Orcas are pretty rare in the Gulf of Mexico, but there are still an estimated 500 orcas living in the Gulf. Now, if you want to take a trip to the beach from Dallas, Rockport Beach is your best bet with only a 6-hour drive, and it's well worth the visit. The best beaches can be found closer to the Mexican border at South Padre Island, which has some of the most beautiful beaches in the country and some great ways for those of you who like to surf. So when it comes to coastline, Texas is a great state to call home, and unless you're coming from Hawaii, California, or Florida, it's hard to beat the beach offerings that Texas brings. Now we get to our first true con versus the Puget Sound when it comes to living here in Dallas, and that is that the area is quite flat. Now, coming from Seattle, you're probably going to notice this a lot more than other people will. One benefit to the flat terrain is that it's easier to build, and that's why Dallas has some of the best amenities for suburban living in the United States, including being famous for having larger-than-life houses compared to other parts of the country. If you are missing the mountains though, hill country in Austin and San Antonio can be a great reprieve from the prairies of Dallas. You can also take a trip over to Colorado and northern New Mexico for true mountain views. Personally, I made an effort to buy a home that backed up to a green space to give me that wooded feeling that I was so used to having growing up in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. These lots can cost a little extra, but the benefit of having something beautiful to look at each morning as I start my day was well worth the cost for me. So the state of Texas has a lot of natural beauty, being the second largest state in the country, but you'll have to seek it out as it won't be in plain sight in the same way that you may expect coming from Washington State. So yeah, the Puget Sound wins on this front, at least up against Dallas. But if you want to see 10 places that you've got to visit in Texas that will convince you that Texas is a truly beautiful state, then make sure you check out my next video about must-visit towns here in Texas. If you're coming from the Seattle-Bellevue Metroplex, you'll find the traffic in Dallas to be a decent improvement, but you're still living in a major metropolitan area, so be prepared for traffic and the all too frequent accidents that will cause minor backups. The great thing about living here over Seattle is that the freeway network is much more expansive. There are almost always multiple routes to get where you're going, and most freeways have a service road that runs alongside them. Now, coming from Seattle, where you only got I-5, 405, and Highway 99 as the only major roadways, you're going to appreciate the expansive options that you have here in Dallas to get around the city. Just like everywhere, Dallas has its share of toll roads. A few major toll roads here are President George Bush Turnpike, Sam Rayburn Tollway, Dallas North Tollway, and some toll roads on I-635 going into Fort Worth. Now, you can get around using the toll roads quite often, but there are a lot of times when it'll save you a decent chunk of time to use them. With the exception of I-635 tollway, they aren't too expensive either. Now, the last thing I gotta mention when it comes to the roads here, if you're from the Puget Sound, you should probably stay out of the left lane. Here in Texas, the right lane's for going 60 miles per hour or even slower, the second lane's for going 70 miles per hour, the third lane's for going 80, but the far left lane, that's for going however fast that your foot can push on that pedal. So don't make the same mistake that a lot of Seattleites often do, which is camping out in the left lane, going slow, because here in Texas, they will run you off the road. However, if you do like driving fast, then you're gonna love it here in Texas because people here want to get where they're going and they want to get there fast. I'd recommend taking a defensive driving course if you're making a move to Texas because these roads can be pretty scary, especially here in Dallas. Now, I've heard from the people I've helped move from Seattle, everything from how much they love how fast people drive here and how easy it is to get around to people thinking that Texans are straight up assholes for how they drive. My advice is just get out of people's way if they're driving like they're playing Twisted Metal, because trust me, the roads are not the place to be teaching people a lesson on etiquette here in Texas. Next up, we've got the local cuisine. This one is a toss-up and really depends on your taste. If you're a big fan of sushi and fish in general, you're probably gonna be disappointed with offerings here in Dallas. Dallas does ship in live fish, so it's not like you can't get good sushi and sashimi here, but it definitely won't stand up to the quality and variety you've come to expect living on the Pacific Ocean. So what Dallas does best is barbecue. You'll find a lot of great spots to try out once you're here. Dallas is known for its brisket, but there are barbecue spots that do everything from pulled pork to ribs and amazing grilled steaks at a very high level. Now, if you haven't had a steak in Texas, you haven't really had a steak, so make sure you try one once you get here. Now, if you aren't feeling barbecue, Dallas is a large metroplex with every type of ethnic food that you could ask for. There's great Indian and Italian food in Frisco, Korean food in Carrollton, Chinese food in Plano, and my personal favorite here in Dallas, which is Nepalese food or momos. Now, Nepalese food's kind of like a cross between Indian and Chinese food, but it's got its own thing. Texas obviously also has Mexican cuisine in abundance, and Dallas is no exception. With about 40% of Texans being of Hispanic origin, it makes sense that there would be a ton of Mexican food food to enjoy here. I have to warn you though, most Mexican restaurants here serve what we call Tex-Mex, which tastes great, but it does have different seasoning styles than what you're probably used to being from Washington State, where they serve a lot of Baja Mexican food. Now, despite what some may say, Tex-Mex is true Mexican food, but it originates from the Rio Grande Valley in southern Texas and northern Mexico during the 1800s, rather than along the coast of Baja California. And don't forget, Texas used to be part of Mexico, and Texans of Spanish-Mexican heritage are known as Tejanos, much like the Californios of California. Dallas is a great place for food, but it isn't known for having as much variety as some Texas cities like Houston or Austin, which are world famous for their food culture. Dallas has a ton of smaller food chains that you won't see anywhere else in the country, probably owing to the fact that Texans are very business savvy and franchising is common here. I also want to take a moment to point out that Texas is one of the few states where you can get In-N-Out Burger and Whataburger in the same town, which is Texas's version of In-N-Out. Now, be careful who you talk smack to when it comes to Whataburger, because they do take that very seriously here.
Fuck you, you're cool, and fuck you, I'm out.
There are a ton of In-N-Out joints around Dallas if you love the California burger, and for some, that's reason enough to make the move to Dallas. Dallas is a much bigger city than Seattle, and a lot of great cuisine is spread throughout the Metroplex. It just takes a minute to figure out where it's all at. Now, if you need pointers on finding your favorite restaurants, feel free to shoot me a text, and I can give you all the details and whatever you're craving, because trust me, my wife's a foodie, so I know most of it at this point. Now, I'm sure if you're looking at moving to Texas, you already know that it's cheaper to live in Dallas than in Seattle. According to Salary.com, the cost of living is currently 22% cheaper in Dallas than it is in Seattle, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Some notable things that are cheaper in Dallas than in Seattle include your food costs, your entertainment costs, your dining expenses, your gas expenses, and much more, to be honest. To illustrate the difference in cost, though, when it comes to home ownership, let's take, for example, this $900,000 home in North Seattle that looks like this, and we've got this $900,000 home in North Dallas that looks like this. Now, if we look at an apples to apples comparison of homes, you would be spending the $900,000 on this in Seattle, and you'd only be spending $475,000 on this one, which has 400 more square feet and the same bedroom and bath count. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that the interior on the one here in Dallas is nicer, seeing as the Seattle listing didn't even provide interior photos. It's also sitting right next to the light rail, which, if you ask me, isn't quite the benefit they seem to think it is, unless you live having your home and car broken into on a regular basis. And this brings me to the next big bonus of living in Dallas over Seattle, and that would be crime. The Seattle Metro ranks higher on crime than the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro, and crime in Seattle has been on a rise for several years as downtown has been gutted out due to the ongoing homelessness and drug crisis that's being so poorly handled by the Seattle City Council. Meanwhile, Dallas has made strides in the opposite direction, reducing violent crime in the most dangerous neighborhoods of Dallas for multiple years in a row. Now, if you move to one of the North Dallas suburbs, you can expect an extremely safe city with Frisco, McKinney, and Plano all in the top 5 safest cities in the country. And these aren't small cities, guys. Plano has a Toyota headquarters, and Frisco boasts a Cowboys training facility and new PGA headquarters that was just finished. Frisco has also been ranked as the 3rd wealthiest city according to Home Snacks, which used the most recent census data to determine where the richest people call home. That wealth is apparent throughout all of North Dallas. When it comes to safety, we have to go all the way down to the 60th safest city before we even see one city in the state of Washington on this list, and that city is Bellevue. For those of you living in Seattle, you know that Seattle and Bellevue are a world apart in terms of how things are being run. So, if you're looking for a place that you can feel safe and secure, then Dallas-Fort Worth is a great option for safety, and it's an excellent place to raise a family. And this brings me to my last pro for Dallas in this list today, which is family values. Seattle used to be a great place to raise a family, but if there's one reason why people are moving out of the area and settling down in states like Tennessee, Florida, and Texas, it's because the overall climate in the Seattle area is just not good for raising children anymore. So whether it comes down to the cost of living, the family values, the parental legal rights, education opportunities, or even just having a community around you of other parents, Seattle falls short where Dallas excels. The Dallas metro population currently has a Generation Z population of 26%, whereas the Seattle metro only has 16% of its population that are in Gen Z. The median age of the Dallas-Fort Worth metro is also only 34 years, which beats Seattle by 2 years and the national average by 4 years. Dallas-Fort Worth is a younger metroplex that has higher birth rates, plenty of affordable housing, a growing job market, and more traditional family values, which makes it an excellent place to raise children. And in 2022, the Texas state population increased by 1.6% compared to Washington state's population increase of 1.26%. And when you look at the raw numbers on this growth, it's much more striking. The state of Texas has gained 9 million more people in its population since the year 2000. This is more than any other state in the union. This also happens to be over 1 million more residents than the entire state of Washington even has. And the growth of Texas has been accelerating in recent years as more and more people discover just how great of a place Texas is is to call home. So if you're considering a move to start a family, then you will be in excellent company here in the state of Texas. And this is just one of the many reasons my wife and I decided to make the move out of the Puget Sound ourselves 5 years ago. So that's all I got for you as far as pros and cons. But let's take a look at our pros and cons scoreboard before we head out. For Dallas, we ended at 6 pros and Seattle at 1. But there were 2 things on here that I consider to be even or dependent on your personality. If you put those to Seattle, we're looking at a 6 to 3 score. I don't mean to rag too hard on Seattle or Washington State. It's a beautiful place to live, and I do have fond memories growing up there, but it's a quickly changing region, and unfortunately those mountains weren't designed for that much population growth. And if you watch this video until the end, I'm sure you know some of the downsides that make living there more difficult lately. When my wife and I moved to Dallas in 2018, I saw where things were heading, and unfortunately, I think the likelihood is that the city of Seattle is going to continue to deteriorate a lot more before things get any better. So I hope you enjoyed this pros and cons list. Please hit that like button for the algorithm and subscribe to my channel for more content just like this. And if you're considering a move to Dallas or elsewhere in the country, please call, text, or email me day or night. I'm always happy to help people buy and sell real estate. And I know agents all over the country who can help make your move a success. And don't forget to join my mailing list in the description below if you haven't yet for weekly updates on the Dallas-Fort Worth market and things you need to know.